In a world where shared facts, truth, and reality are eroding, are community notes the solution? Or do they just create more confusion? And is that all just by design? I'm Dan from the internet. This is a detour, and I have mostly quit using social media besides being a content creator. There's some level of it that you have to use in order to do it, but I do my best not to scroll in my free time. I have a lot of these timers that are built into my devices to make sure I don't use them too much. I try to spend more time going outside, being in my community, actually helping, doing things that are more fulfilling, such as making and thinking about these videos. I've talked about this in some other videos. I'll link them down below in the description. By the way, please like this video and share it so I can keep making more. I mean all that to say, I've started using X/Twitter again because I was given access to the community notes feature. I can vote on community notes, I can edit community notes, and just to be clear so we're all on the same page, community notes are supposedly a fact-checking system. It's implemented on Twitter, now called X, and is now being rolled out to Meta platforms. So you're seeing them more on Facebook and Instagram and Threads. These sort of crowdsourced fact-checking and information gathering methods are nothing new to the internet. I think Wikipedia is the most famous version of this and the most reputable based on the community culture within Wikipedia and the way that sources are vetted. I think Reddit's a good example of this too, but you can go all the way back to the early forms of what we now know as the internet with Web 2.0, with Yahoo Answers and Ask Jeeves and different online internet forums that were built by hobbyists who really cared about a certain topic, maybe cared a little bit too much. So the internet has a time-honored tradition of letting people jump in with their own expert advice or niche expert advice and try to help people reach solutions and answers to problems. So much so that the artificial intelligence of today is scraping up all this information from the internet and trying to regurgitate it out for us to consume in the modern time. Community notes on X started as birdwatch on Twitter. It, along with Twitter's vetted and verified badge system, the blue check marks, as they were derisively called at a certain point, were meant to work together to hinder disinformation. If someone had a blue check mark, that meant that they were with a reputable journalistic source, or they're with an institution, a think tank, a college, a university. They were who they say they were. And Twitter, as a company, did the work to verify that. There's some criticisms and qualms about how transparent that is, but I think once we saw Elon Musk buy Twitter, turn it to X, make it so you could buy a tick mark for a few bucks a month, and then made an even higher tier where if you spent $1,000 a month, you got an even specialer gold check mark. That hasn't really stopped the problem of people misrepresenting who they are. It just created a small barrier to entry in the form of a fee for doing so. And because of the right-wing bent that Elon Musk had, trying to correct for a perceived left-wing bias that the old Twitter had, he opened the floodgates and openly started making sure that posts from right-wing conservatives were pushed to people's algorithms, whether they were true or not. And oftentimes they weren't. Meta has also followed this pay-to-play model where anyone with the amount of money for the subscription can have a tick mark next to their profile. The truth is, both social media platforms, most if not all social media platforms, don't really care about truth or authenticity like that. They care about the 3 R's: rage bait, retention, and revenue. Those are the things that keep people using the platform. Those are the things that give that platform relevance. And ultimately, that's what allows them to sell advertising to make these otherwise free platforms incredibly profitable. And they can use your interactions on that site to build profiles of you that follow you everywhere you go onto the internet, to sell you things even when you're not using these social media platforms to begin with. Because these lines of authenticity are being blurred, it's much easier for people with the money and with the means to just buy bot farms or to buy attention or to buy relevance, a boost in these algorithms by having these tick marks by your account. And that's polluted the information ecosystem that once existed on platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, now known as X. Now you might be saying, Dan, you can make community notes now, so maybe there's a way for you to be able to change the tide and for others to be able to change the tide. Well, I'll note that while you can apply to be a part of community notes on X, and by apply, I mean you just tick a button saying that you are interested in being part of it, there doesn't seem to be much of a vetting process. And while I know some people who went through that form and ultimately got access to it, I never filled out the form and I was given access to community notes. So I can see the proposed community notes that regular people can't. And I think there's one great example I can use here to illustrate what the problem is with this feature overall. New York City Mayor Zoran Mamndani tweeted in response to Trump's kidnapping of the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and his extradition to New York City for a supposed trial. Zohar Mamdani, as the mayor of New York City, had many things to say about this. He gave this statement that I'm going to read right here. I was briefed this morning on the U.S. military capture of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, as well as their planned imprisonment in federal custody here in New York City. Unilaterally attacking a sovereign nation is an act of war and a violation of federal and international law. This blatant pursuit of regime change doesn't just affect those abroad, it directly impacts New Yorkers, including tens of thousands of Venezuelans who call this city home. My focus is their safety and the safety of every New Yorker, and my administration will continue to monitor the situation and issue relevant guidance. Now, for me, I have the ability to see the proposed community notes behind this. And this happens with a lot of politicians who make claims or statements, but this one was a pretty innocuous one. Mamdani spoke to the Trump administration about the Maduro incident. Mamdani asserts that this is against international law, and Mamdani makes a comment about how he wants to protect all New Yorkers and do what's best for them, and so he'll be monitoring the situation to see what develops, because very clearly the Trump administration is doing whatever it wants to right now with no regard for the law, either nationally or internationally. So you'll see some of these notes here, and you can vote on them. One says, tens of thousands of Venezuelans who call New York home are celebrating the capture of Maduro, and then links to an X post supposedly showing this. Now, we've since learned that a number of people were trying to show videos of Venezuelans celebrating using AI-generated video. More on that in a moment. But the truth is, Venezuelans, like no people, are a monolith. As I spoke about in my longer Power Report video that I'll link to in the description about the actual attack and invasion of Venezuela that happened a couple days ago at time of recording, Venezuelans are not a monolith. Just as Americans are not a monolith. You have people who supported Maduro, you have people who are against Maduro. It's a mixed bag, but the idea that another country can just unilaterally go in and decide to bomb another country, ostensibly for their natural resources, and ostensibly to do regime change and to put someone who is more favorable to the attacking country, that puts a lot of people at risk. It puts New Yorkers at risk for retaliation. It compounds upon the risks of the Trump administration using immigration agents to snatch people up and send them to countries they're not even from, even when they have legal status in America. So this is just one example of a partisan attempt to shift community notes, this sort of source of truth, into the favor of the regime. Another note, U.S. military intervention to capture Maduro was done with the approval of the legitimately elected leaders of the country. So not an attack, but supporting a friendly nation that needs help and has asked for help. Again, I explained in the other video about how the United States has seen Venezuela as a potential enemy in its sphere with influence in not just the Trump administration, but during the Biden administration as well. But it then links to an article about Maria Corina Machado, someone who Donald Trump has already said is not fit to lead Venezuela. She was an opposition leader in Venezuela who was given the Nobel Peace Prize and said that she was accepting the award in honor of Donald Trump and all of the peace that he's doing. I don't believe there's anywhere that says Machado is the legitimate leader of Venezuela, and I don't think America or the West gets to make that choice for Venezuelans. Here's another one. Zohar Mamdani previously called for regime change by advocating the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. That wouldn't be regime change. That would be arresting Netanyahu for the international war crimes that he has committed. By the way, Donald Trump is tacking on those as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if other countries and other people of conscience around the world start to take that advice from Zohar Mamdani and treat that with our president, Donald Trump. Here's another. Maduro lost the presidential election to Edmundo Gonzalez, but rigged the results to ensure he won. Election observers at the Carter Center confirmed the election did not meet international standards of electoral integrity and cannot be considered democratic. Again, I mentioned this in my past video. International organizations have questioned the legitimacy of Maduro's leadership. They've questioned the legitimacy of the election there. But again, who is the official elected leader? Is it Edmundo Gonzalez? Is it Machado? It seems like the people in community notes don't even know either. It's a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people who are the least informed about something overcompensate by insisting that they have the most information, even more than other experts. Experts who have the good sense to know when their actual knowledge is starting to be limited, and so they'll professionally and responsibly hedge a little bit. Again, these are attempts at fact-checking, but they all miss the point of Mamdani's actual post, and instead try to assert that what is being done is actually legal, which is the exact same thing that the people who are responsible for this, Marco Rubio, Pete Kegsbreath, Donald Trump, Dementia Don, these are the justifications that they are putting out. So these fact checkers are essentially trying to pollute the realm of reality by asserting that the state's facts are the real facts. Another post here, again, all using sources either from Twitter itself or straight from the State Department, Trump's State Department. So it's not necessarily an unbiased second opinion here. But it's trying to create another justification, saying the U.S. did not unilaterally attack a sovereign nation. 50 countries, U.S. included, do not recognize Maduro as the head of state. Okay, well, you could look at the number of countries that have condemned Israel for war crimes, mass starvation, even genocide in Gaza, and look at what the international community is doing there. If anything, enabling Netanyahu for doing these same things. These notes continue here with mostly regurgitating the same points. One says, Maduro is the head of a criminal enterprise and is under indictment. It doesn't implicate Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter. It was a military operation in support of law enforcement and not an act of war, which is an interpretation of the law. And law is often open to interpretations, but the source here is a very biased lawyer who seems to be in the tank for the Trump administration, based on what you could see. For all we know, the source, the person who wrote this community note, is that same guy. Because the factor about community notes is that your profile in community notes is not tied at all to your actual profile on Twitter. So if everyone's anonymous in community notes, you can't source back the credentials or the credibility that one brings to the table when they are writing a community note. So this could be anyone. For all we know, the people writing these community notes could be part of the State Department itself. Then you have a section of community notes that shows notes that have been rated not helpful. Again, you can write community notes, or you can also vote on them, and you can choose why it's helpful, somewhat helpful, or not helpful at all. And there's one post that cites Brianna Wu, which is funny. Another one claiming that independent confirmation from multiple non-US sources of their custody status and planned imprisonment in New York has not yet been publicly verified. The links are not to any news articles, but to the news pages of the AP, Reuters, and Al Jazeera. The AP is also a US source, even though they all have international bureaus. And you have notes explaining why notes are not needed, or NNN. People kind of bring a little bit of reality here to the situation, asking people to not pollute this so-called fact-checking system with their own biased political beliefs. Also, I didn't mention this because it wasn't in this post, but Grok AI, the AI that Elon Musk made on Twitter/X, can also write community notes that people can vote on as well, which is fine. Because we all know that AI is accurate. And we all know that Grok AI can be trusted and is safe.
Hey, it's sultry voice, early morning post-production Dan here. And as I was finishing the editing for this video on the 7th of January 2026, Renee Nicole Macklin Good, a 37-year-old woman from Minneapolis, Minnesota, or at least the surrounding area, was shot by an ICE agent as she was being confronted during one of their raids, which was happening in her neighborhood just as she had dropped off her son from school. It sparked lots of protests nationwide, but on community notes, it has also sparked a lot of debate and discussion, even when there's very little up for debate. The state is trying to justify a public execution, and it's clear when you look at the community notes under a post like this from Homeland Security, claiming that Renee Good was a violent rioter who weaponized her vehicle and not someone whose last words were, "I don't hate you, man," to the ICE agent who would shoot her just a second later, with that ICE agent, or at least one of them near her, calling her a fucking bitch as she lost consciousness. You do see a lot of people refuting the evidence here with the video that they can in the community notes. A lot of this language trying to refute ICE is definitely on the politically charged side, even though they're using evidence that is widely believed to be correct, and that this Trump Department of Homeland Security has proven itself to be wrong and unfactual in multiple cases. And then the community notes explaining why notes aren't needed are largely following the DHS's line that this was a law enforcement officer who is using justifiable force in the situation, and therefore there's no need to fact-check the Department of Homeland Security or Kristi Noem or J.D. Vance. Of course, there is a need to fact-check Bernie Sanders' post on this, which is not to say that Bernie Sanders is above being fact-checked, but you can see the bent that community notes has even during a moment like this. Renee Good, who is widely believed to have been trying to flee and not trying to weaponize her vehicle, is being slandered with no way to draw breath, let alone defend herself. And again, you'll note that the sources that claim the context is needed on the Bernie Sanders post here, which is a largely innocuous statement, comes with armchair legal analysis from someone we don't even know has any sort of legal credibility, essentially trying to argue the government's point here. This is a tragedy and a big challenge against, First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, the Constitution as a whole. And I have no feeling that this is going to get better within the Trump administration. Also, to further buttress this point, there's a poll from Data for Progress and Zateo that claims to say 52% of all voters are not believing the ICE officer in Minneapolis was justified in using lethal force and therefore don't believe the DHS's story in this case. 84% of Democrat and 58% of independent/third-party voters don't believe that the action was justified, versus 68% of Republican voters who do believe it's justified. And I don't necessarily think that polling is the source of truth for a situation that happened. I think the video evidence and what law enforcement officials have said who aren't in DHS, who have analyzed that video evidence, I think what they have to say matters the most. In addition to the, as I mentioned before, the overall context of what the ICE operations are and what the people who are in charge of them are intending for them to be. With people like J.D. Vance saying he wants ICE agents to go door to door, literally echoing the worst parts of European history in World War II, from a regime that also lied to its people about its military and police actions. But it goes to show how partisan opinion is so strong in the United States of America and possibly even worldwide. It's so strong now that people who just want to be correct, who want to have the correctiness to expand upon Stephen Colbert's truthiness, but you have a population of people who want to feel right, and so they're willing to believe things that are just factually not correct. Don't tread on me, my fucking ass. And I don't mean to analyze this too clinically, because this is something that should worry and anger Americans of conscience, regardless of political party or affiliation or lack thereof. But the point here is, even in a very clear example with video with a lot of different angles and the context of who ICE is under the Donald Trump administration and in general, that community notes is still a place where reality itself is being debated and you're told to not trust your lying eyes. And at the end of the day, this amount of nonsensical debate means that community notes ended up not being under that post overall. And whether that has to do with the relationship that Elon Musk has with the Trump administration, or just the fact that there was so much debate that there wasn't an ability to find consensus, that is still a pollution of the stream of information. And that's where I'm going to go back to the part I had previously recorded. Rest in power, Renee Good.
By the way, you can help me out for free here by liking this video, leaving a comment, following the Offline Danny page where you'll see more videos like this in the future, and share it out with someone who needs to know about community notes. I really appreciate it. But we can put the AI ramifications aside because they're obvious and that could be an entirely other different video. Big tech has a certain approach to knowledge, and it's that it can't really be known. It can't really be discovered. You can't go to people who work at universities, people who are researchers, people with published, vetted, and accredited sources in their history to be able to adjudicate what facts are, especially in fast-moving situations like news events. No, the tech oligarchs believe that that must be decided by the unwashed masses, by the public, in an anonymous and non-transparent way to wash their hands of the entire situation altogether. They have blog posts saying how these notes processes work, but many of them are old and don't include some of the iterations and policy changes that might be happening with these platforms. So I don't really think they can be trusted on the whole to believe that the system is not being infiltrated by state actors, or at the very least, rubes who don't understand what rigorous fact-checking looks like or how it's practiced. And if anything, I can blame fact-checkers at larger outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times, who have done so badly, even though they have those credentials in the past, that's created this public demand for alternative forms of fact-checking. But fact-checking done by tech oligarchs who lean right-wing anyways is not the answer and it's not the solution. But again, I think this is by design. You've seen it. Tech oligarchs and business people will bend the knee to whoever is in charge. Right now, it's Donald Trump, and right now it's this belief that wokeness is an assault on the world. Elon Musk called it the woke mind virus. And even though the word woke has been bastardized so much from its original intent, these are the marching orders that everyone in Silicon Valley and beyond are using to build not just tools like community notes, but tools like AI and other things that are happening. Facial recognition that also exemplifies these biases. Hell, down to who gets hired and who doesn't when it's chosen by AI. Much like democracies around the world are kind of kabuki theater, kayfabe shows that are put on that give people the illusion of choice, community notes is the illusion of fact-checking. Community notes is the illusion of crowdsourced information. It's the illusion of something like Wikipedia, but something far less vetted, far less accountable, far less transparent, and far more dangerous. Did I mention these tech companies are going after Wikipedia as well? And I can paraphrase one of the hardest quotes from one of my favorite movies ever made. If everyone's a fact checker, no one is. That's what oligarchs tech and beyond want, to erode truth and trust so they can replace it with their own reality that suits them and makes them richer and more powerful at the expense of the global proletariat. And to make half of y'all not even worry about that because you think that you can be armchair experts. Not folks in this audience, y'all are good. Again, this is a detour. Please check out the Dan from the Internet channel that you're probably watching this on, but also check out the Offline Danny channel where you'll be seeing more things like this. It's a little bit different from Power Report. It's going to be more of these quicker dives into different topics that are going on, and also things that are a little bit offbeat from politics. You'll see more of that soon. But thank you for watching. Thank you for all the supporters on YouTube, Twitch, and Syndicate23.co who pay a little bit of money to be able to make sure that I'm able to continue doing these things. And also forgive the fact that I've taken a little bit of a break so I can retool myself and get ready to make more videos like this in the future. So I appreciate y'all, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Cheers.